Hi, I'm Jennifer Bassett from Thriving Grade 5. In this video, I want to talk about how I teach the Daughters of Liberty to my students. We always seem to hear a lot about the Sons of Liberty when it comes to the American Revolution, but not so much about the Daughters of Liberty. And I think that they were just as important as the Sons of Liberty, so I definitely make sure to teach them with my American Revolution unit. So back in the 18th century, women, it didn't matter if they were rich or poor, old or young, they had a lot of challenges. Women were not allowed to serve in government offices. They were not allowed to vote. Women, if they were married, they had no legal rights and no legal standing. When women married, their husbands automatically controlled any property that the wife may have had before the marriage. Women were over a century away from having voting rights. So we don't really have many primary source journals or letters from everyday women during the American Revolution. I'm sure we have lots of letters from Abigail Adams and Martha Washington, but regular, everyday, hardworking ladies, we have very few primary source documents from them. Women in the 18th century, especially women of lower means, had to work from sunrise to sunset, and they had very little time to just sit down and write in journals or write letters. Another reason we don't have a lot of primary sources from women is that women's writings often weren't saved from generation to generation. People would be eager to preserve letters and journals and records of important men, famous, well-known men like George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, but they were much less likely to save women's writings. So how do we know about the Daughters of Liberty? Well, we have to use the records that do exist. Just like the Sons of Liberty, the group known as the Daughters of Liberty formed in response to British tax laws. Patriotic women felt that the taxes placed on colonists were unfair because the colonists had no representation in Parliament. Daughters of Liberty boycotted or refused to buy taxed British goods. So how do you think they got the items that they needed? If they refused to buy taxed British cloth, how do you think they got cloth to make clothing for their families? Well, they used their skills, their domestic or home skills, to make what they needed. Domestic skills were skills like spinning, sewing, cooking. They even brewed their own alternative tea. Daughters of Liberty would not dream of buying taxed British tea, so they brewed their own tea and called it Liberty Tea. There are many varieties of Liberty tea. One that I've tried was made from raspberry plant leaves, and it tasted pretty good. It was decent. Liberty tea could be brewed using lots of different plants, herbs, or fruits. Mint and basil, that's one that I've heard was very popular. Strawberries, peppermint, raspberries, lavender, roses, blueberries. Women would use what they had at their disposal to brew Liberty tea. Patriotic women, including the Daughters of Liberty, refused to buy taxed British fabric or cloth. Instead, they would use their spinning wheels to create yarn that would become fabric. Spinning yarn that was woven into fabric was pretty lonely, so women organized spinning bees. They would set up their spinning wheels and spin for the entire day. Women really enjoyed these bees because they were able to talk, share stories, gossip, and discuss political thoughts. It was not appropriate for ladies in the 18th century to discuss political matters, especially in front of men, men who weren't their family members. So when these ladies got together for their spinning bees, they felt much more at ease and able to talk about the political issues of the day. This is a primary source account of a spinning bee that happened in Massachusetts in 1769. So this was before the Road to Revolution, before all of those events started that led to the American Revolution. But this is really a very interesting source to help us understand what spinning bees were like. So it says on April 1st, this is 1769, we are also advised from Huntington on Long Island that very lately a company of young ladies belonging to that town, to the number of 16, so 16 young ladies, met to spend the day together, not in idle dissipation, not in idle wasting of time, as is too often the case, but with a truly laudable or praiseworthy design of promoting industry. This primary source, just the beginning of it, I think is so, it was definitely written by a man, because he says the young ladies didn't spend the day wasting it. They weren't idle, but they were truly, in a praiseworthy way, promoting industry. I think this right here, as is too often the case, that's what annoys me the most. It's very judgy, wouldn't you agree? For they had no sooner met together, but to divert themselves, they each took their spinning wheels and applied themselves so closely, and with that dexterity, that at the close of the day, so at the end of the day, they had spun 107 skeins, weighing 32 pounds of very good linen yarn. So these ladies, even though they are normally wasting time, they got together and they spun 32 pounds of yarn. The ladies were all decently clad in homespun, the manufacture of their own town. So homespun is homespun cloth. It was called homespun because it was in contrast to commercial British cloth that was taxed. If you were wearing the commercial, the fine, good quality British cloth, then someone would definitely know that you were a loyalist and that you just did not care about the the events that are taking place that are leading up to where we'll get to the American Revolution, who, like true female patriots, shewed by their conduct, so they acted like female patriots, that they despise to dress with the manufacture of a country that is endeavoring to enslave us. The colonists, whether we agree or not, the colonists felt like they were being enslaved by British taxes, by being forced to pay these, to them, unfair British taxes. So he's saying that we can tell who the true female patriots are because they are dressed in their homespun cloth and they refuse to buy the taxed cloth from Britain, who is, of course, trying to enslave them with taxes. It also appeared that a female patriotism was predominant in their conduct when the tea table was introduced. For instead of making use of any foreign tea, so British tea, which has become more nauseous since loaded with an unconstitutional tax, they substituted a tea, the growth of that town, called evergreen. So instead of drinking the British tea, they refused and they substituted their own tea. Okay, so According to the Daughters of Liberty, they would say yes to homespun fabric that was made at home by hand, and then fancy taxed British finery. No way. There was no way a Daughter of Liberty, a patriotic woman, would wear taxed British cloth. This broadside, a broadside is a poster, if you will. But this broadside was posted anonymously around Boston sometime between 1768 and 1770. A broadside is a large piece of paper printed on one side. In the 18th century, broadsides were used to display important public information. It says William Jackson, an importer. So this is a man whose business is to order goods from England and bring them to his shop to be sold. At the Brazen Head north side of the townhouse and opposite the town pump in Cornhill, Boston. So they are clearly describing this William Jackson so that everyone knows who he is and where he is. I love this down here. It is desired that the sons and daughters of liberty would not buy any one thing of him, for in so doing they will bring disgrace among themselves and their posterity forever and ever. Amen. I think this is a little dramatic, but they are definitely showing how they feel about this Mr. Jackson bringing in all of these taxed goods. They are saying that if you are a son or daughter of liberty, don't you dare buy anything from him. You will bring disgrace on yourself and your posterity, your children, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on. Forever. You will bring disgrace on your family forever if you buy anything from this William Jackson. So they definitely felt strongly about people purchasing taxed goods. So this broadside, how can it relate to the boycott of taxed British goods by the Daughters of Liberty? Well, the Daughters of Liberty refused to purchase items that were taxed. Mr. Jackson owned a store in Boston where he sold general items, groceries, hardware, including taxed items. The majority of merchants in Boston signed a non-importation agreement, meaning they would not import goods from England that were taxed. Well, Mr. Jackson decided not to sign it, and he continued to import taxed items from England. So he's not a favorite of the Sons and Daughters of Liberty, for sure. Mr. Jackson, he faced a lot of harassment from patriots, especially Sons of Liberty. Patriots would stand outside Mr. Jackson's shop and harass his customers. They made signs that pointed out the fact that Mr. Jackson imported taxed British goods. And allegedly, there was an attempt to burn down his store. So what happened to Mr. Jackson? Do you think he stayed in Boston? No, I don't think he did. He remained a loyalist and fled Boston in 1776. So same year as the signing of the Declaration of Independence. He fled Boston with British soldiers. He died in England in 1810. I wouldn't have stuck around either if I was Mr. Jackson. He probably was not able to make a lot of money with the Sons of Liberty harassing his customers and, possibly trying to burn his shop down. So we've all heard of the Boston Tea Party, of course, where those Sons of Liberty disguised themselves as Mohawk people and they destroyed hundreds of crates of taxed tea. This was the ultimate protest against the Tea Act. But have you heard of the Boston Coffee Party? The Daughters of Liberty weren't always quiet and well behaved. instance, they felt it was necessary to take matters into their own hands. Abigail Adams is going to tell us what happened. And here's a hint. It involved this guy here. This portrait is done so well by John Singleton Copley. It almost looks like a photograph. But this is Thomas Boylston, and he is part of the story of what happened. Okay, so this is a letter from Abigail to her husband, John Adams, in 1777. I have nothing new to entertain you with, unless it is an account of a new set of mobility, that means wealthy people, which have lately taken the lead in Boston. You must know that there is a great scarcity of sugar and coffee, articles which the female part of the state are very loth to give up. So women do not want to give up their sugar and coffee. They will, but they don't want to. Especially while they consider the scarcity occasioned by the merchants having secreted a large quantity. So the merchants have taken some of the coffee and sugar, which are that are available and not taxed, and they've been hidden. There's been much rout and noise in the town for several weeks. Some stores have been opened by a number of people, and coffee and sugar carried into the market and dealt out by pounds. It was rumored that an eminent, wealthy, stingy merchant, I love that description, eminent, wealthy, stingy merchant, who is a bachelor. She had to throw in that he's not married, because obviously if he was married, he wouldn't be doing these things. This merchant had a hogshead, which is a barrel that holds 64 gallons, so a pretty big barrel, of coffee in his store, which he refused to sell to the committee under 6 shillings per pound. So what does this remind you of? Scarcity, merchants knowing that they've got something everyone wants and pushing the price up to an unreasonable amount. That's what this guy's doing. A number of females, some say 100, some say more, assembled with a cart and trucks, marched down to the warehouse and demanded the keys, which he refused to deliver. Upon which one of them seized him by his neck and tossed him into the cart. Upon his finding no quarter or no relief, he delivered the keys. When they tipped up the cart and discharged him, so they threw him out of the cart, then opened the warehouse, hoisted out the coffee themselves, put it into the trucks, and drove off. They didn't actually drive. It means they pushed the carts away. So they knew he was holding back all of this coffee, and he was trying to sell it for a large amount. And so the women took it upon themselves to go get that coffee. I can totally see this happening with some of my teacher friends. If they were being denied their iced coffee in the mornings, they would probably do the same thing to Mr. Thomas Boylston. It was reported that he had a spanking among them, but this, I believe, was not true. A large concourse of men stood amazed, silent, spectators of the whole transaction. So she's saying that a lot of men stood around and watched what happened to Mr. Boylston and didn't do anything to intervene. They probably knew better than to intervene, right? Moral of this story, don't hoard coffee and try to sell it for a high price, especially when the Daughters of Liberty are around. During the boycott on tea, 9-year-old Susan, I think it's Boudinot, maybe, and her Patriot parents attended a gathering at the home of New Jersey's governor. When she was offered tea, Susan refused. She didn't want the taxed tea. However, at some point, she was served tea anyway. Susan carried the teacup across the room and dumped the tea from the window of the home. Good for her. Both the Sons and Daughters of Liberty protested unfair taxes, but they used different methods. While the Sons of Liberty were loud, forceful, violent, doing screaming protests and marching in the street and tarring and feathering tax collectors, Daughters of Liberty were creative and industrious. Whose approach do you think was more effective? It's hard for me to say. I think they were both really effective ways to get across the point that these unfair taxes were unacceptable. I would love for you to keep learning about women in the American Revolution and teaching your students about women in the Revolution. Meet the Daughters of Liberty is a student-facing video with slides and several printables and activities that your students will enjoy. And this, if you teach writing and social studies, American Revolution camp followers were mostly women, and this resource is a paired passage with multiple types of writing prompts and activities. I hope to talk to you again soon.